is an evaluation of stimulus magnitude on the preference rank and reinforcing effects of leisure and edible stimuli by Rachel Malabi at the Southern Illinois University. As this slide states, my study examined differences in magnitude of stimuli in two categories and which of the categories would be more reinforcing to the individuals. We had 4 adults with intellectual disabilities as participants for the study. In phase 1, 1 preferred leisure activity and 1 preferred edible stimuli were both identified for each participant. In phase 2, the preferred leisure activity was presented in 2 different time-based sections, and the preferred edible was likewise presented in 2 different quantity-based sections. So in phase 3, a reinforcer assessment was attempted with high stable responding across all 4 participants. In phase 4, the same 4 stimuli were presented with a work requirement component prior to the presentation of the reinforcement. These results further support the finding that preference assessments can predict potential reinforcements as stated by De Leon and Iwata in 1996, as well as magnitude having an effect on preference, Trosclair 2008. However, differences in magnitude did not have a uniform effect on responding with all participants. This image is of an individual working with his therapist in a vocational setting. To begin with our introduction, I first wanted to look into the types of preference assessment. So Pace et al., 1985, we begin our journey of preference assessments with their single presentation preference assessment. Fisher et al., 1992, looked into the first forced choice or paired choice preference assessment. And De Leon and Iwata in 1996 used the MSWO preference assessment. Next, we have duration versus selection-based preference assessment. Kodak and Kang both discussed how the use of selection and not duration-based preference assessment are more effective, and that the MSWO deemed more acceptable in identifying a reinforcer. When looking at the effects of different stimuli on preference assessment outcomes, De Leon, Iwata, and Roscoe, as well as Ortega and colleagues, found that food versus leisure, food items seem to be more reinforcing or preferred than leisure items in individuals with intellectual disabilities. They found that edibles were higher likely to be chosen, and they had more long-term effects in the end, as Ortega did a long-term study. For how magnitude affects preference, Master and Mokros in 1973, as well as Hope and colleagues, and Hoffman and colleagues, and Steinhover and Johnson 2007 all looked into. All 4 of these studies found that magnitude did, in fact, show a difference in preferences of individuals. The purpose of my study was twofold. First was to determine if stimulus magnitude would affect preference for leisure and edible stimuli in participants. The second was to determine if a work requirement would change the relative preference of stimuli of high and low magnitude. Here is a layout of my method. So we have 4 adult participants with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities for our study. 1 completed the project in his workplace, and the rest of the participants were in their day homes. So we started with an interview. We did an interview for all 4 participants prior to any of the preference assessments. Next, we did 2 MSWOs with each participant, 1 for the edible preferred items and 1 for their leisure preferred items. In the next phase, we did a paired stimulus preference assessment. And finally, we did the MSW with tasks. Here is an image of what we would call an MSWO, or multiple stimulus without replacement preference assessment. In this image, it seems to be with edibles, and like I said earlier, we did one for edibles with each participant and one with leisure activities with each participant. So we laid out 6 different stimuli in front of each participant, and they were instructed to pick one. And whenever that stimuli was chosen, all the other items were removed from their sight until that item was either consumed if it was an edible or engaged with for a minute for the leisure activity. Then the rest of the stimuli were represented in front of the participant in a rotating fashion so that not one item would be in the same location. We did this until all the stimuli were selected from each MSWO to get the most preferred edible and leisure activity. Like I said in the previous slide, the first of the 4 phases was the MSWO with the edibles and leisure activities. So moving on to the next phase, phase 2 was the paired choice preference assessment. We did this with a string of different magnitudes for each of the preferred items. So for example, if the most preferred edible was a peanut, that was presented in either 1 peanut or 4 peanuts. If, for example, the most preferred leisure activity was chutes and ladders, that activity was presented either for 1 minute or for 4 minutes. These were paired amongst each other a total of 12 times. For phase 3, a reinforcer assessment was attempted in which the participants had 2 minutes to complete a simple task in order to receive the reinforcement. At baseline level, the participants were told that they could do as much work as they wanted, as little work as they wanted, or no work at all, but that they were not going to receive a reinforcement. However, all 4 participants completed the task in the 2-minute period, regardless of the instructions. So then phase 4 was developed, which was an MSW with tasks. So participants were given the task again, but were presented with the 4 options of the edible with the high magnitude, the edible with the low magnitude, the leisure activity with the high magnitude, and the leisure activity with the low magnitude. And were instructed to pick one to work for. Here are the results from phase 1. So these are just individual data from our MSWO with the quantity-based stimuli, so the edibles. So participant 1, Emma, as you can see, her highest preferred edible was the fruit snack. For Melanie, participant 2, her highest preferred edible was banana. For Victoria, participant 3, her highest preferred edible was the pecan. And for Jerry, participant 4, his highest preferred edible was a grape. Here is our figure 2 that is also from phase 1, the MSWO, but this is with the leisure activities or the time-based stimuli. For Emma, her highest preferred was Dino Doc, which is a little documentary that you can YouTube about dinosaurs. Participant 2, Melanie, her highest preferred was The Avengers. So that could be the cartoon or the movie we used for her. Participant 3, Victoria, her highest preferred leisure activity was engraving, little art. And then for Jerry, participant 4, his highest preferred leisure activity was Candyland. Here are the results from phase 2, which was the paired choice preference assessment. As well as the MSWO, the data are displayed by the percentage of opportunities that each stimulus was chosen by the participant. So as I said earlier, there were 6 total opportunities presented for each pairing, but 12 total opportunities for each stimulus. Participant 1, Emma, chose the Dino Doc at the high magnitude 100% of the time when presented. Participant 2, Melanie, had the same results for the Avengers with the low magnitude, as well as her edible, the banana, at the high magnitude at around 75%. For participant 3, Victoria, her highest was the engraving at the high magnitude. And for Jerry, participant 4, he chose Candyland at the high magnitude 100% of the time. Here are the results for phase 3, and these are for the baseline reinforcement sessions. Because all 4 participants performed at ceiling level, there was not another phase of this reinforcement session, and that's why we moved on to phase 4. All 4 participants completed the task in the 2-minute period, regardless of the instruction that no reinforcement would be given. Here are the results for phase 4, which was the multiple stimulus with replacement with task. The data are displayed by percentage of opportunities each stimulus was chosen by the participants, and 4 total opportunities were presented. For participant 1, Emma, she again chose the Dino Jock high magnitude at 100%. Melanie, our participant 2, chose the Avengers low magnitude and Banana high magnitude, again, just like in phase 2, as the most. Participant 3, Victoria, engraving high magnitude and pecan low magnitude were both her. She chose those the most out of the 4. And participant 4, Jerry, chose Candyland high magnitude at 100% of the time. Here are some concluding results that correlate with phase 2 and phase 4, which would be the paired stimulus preference assessment and the multiple stimulus with replacement task. So these kind of just depict the differences in these 2, as well as the similarities in what each participant chose. The diamonds depict the time-based high magnitude stimuli. The squares depict the time-based low magnitude stimuli. The triangles depict the quantity-based high magnitude stimuli, and the circles depict the quantity-based low magnitude stimuli. So Emma, Dino Dog high magnitude was correlated 100% for both the paired stimulus and the multiple stimulus with replacement. She chose Dino Talk 100% of the time on each. For participant 2, Melanie, her results were a little skewed in that the Avengers low magnitude went from pretty high in the paired choice to 0 in the multiple stimulus. But as you can see, Avengers high magnitude and Banana low magnitude were stable. For participant 3, Victoria, as depicted by the graph, all of her choices were correlational, and that the pecan high magnitude stayed about the same, which, like I said, is the triangle, and everything else kind of went down a little bit. For Jerry, participant 4, Candyland high magnitude was 100% of the time on each, the paired stimulus and the MSW with task. To quickly recap my results, in phase 1, equally preferred effective reinforcers were identified for all 4 participants. Phase 2, stable or increasing rates of responding towards specific stimuli in a certain magnitude occurred for each of the 4 participants. The data depict very little difference in responses across phases 2 and 4, as in the graph previously shown. There was no uniform effect, however, of reinforcer type that was evident when evaluating differences in magnitude for participants 2 and 3, Melanie and Victoria, respectively. Participants 1 and 4, Emma and Jerry, did show a uniform effective preference in reinforcer type when the majority of their responses were allocated to one type of stimuli at the time at the same magnitude each response. My discussion begins with results from Murphy et al. 2003, suggesting that for participants 2 and 3, Victoria and Melanie, satiation may have taken place for them not to choose the same reinforcement each time. These assessments were done day after day after day with these participants, and it could be that maybe Melanie had too many bananas or Victoria had too many pecans. The results of this study also mimic that of Davison and Baum 2003 in that magnitude did have an effect, but its effect was not uniform over all participants. As stated earlier, participants 1 and 4 both shown that magnitude did have an effect for them and that they chose the high magnitude leisure activity 100% of the time. However, participants 2 and 3 did not. The findings replicate that of Fisher et al. 1992 and De Leon 1996, and that the forced paired choice preference assessment can identify a high preference that can effectively function as a reinforcer. For these participants, the same preferred stimuli that they chose in the paired stimulus preference assessment also functioned as their highest chosen reinforcer in the reinforcer assessment in the MSW with task. The results of these assessments were also able to help add to the literature of De Leon, Iwata, and Roscoe 1997 as they discussed the use of edibles when identifying preferences for individuals with developmental disabilities. So as stated earlier, Emma and Jerry both chose leisure items as their highest preferred. However, Melanie and Victoria seem to enjoy the edible stimuli just as much as the leisure. Results of these assessments can be evaluated to assist the future of preference and reinforcer assessments conducted in classroom settings for teachers and others to use with children. They can also be used in residential care facilities and other work living environments with supervisors. One limitation of the current study was that the experimenter's attention appeared to serve as a reinforcer to the participants and was apparent during the baseline sessions of the attempted reinforcer assessment, which was Phase 3. The instructions were given to each participant that they could do as much work, as little work, or no work as they wanted, but with no reinforcement given. However, all 4 participants still engaged in the 2-minute task to receive no reinforcement. This could be thought that perhaps the experimenter's attention was reinforcing enough that each participant was willing to work for nothing. Another limitation includes the effects of smaller, more immediate rewards versus larger, more delayed rewards in regards to the time of day the rewards are presented and delivered for participants' body type as well as their health. This is more speaking to participant number 3, Victoria, who seemed to be slightly, she was very conscious of her body and what she would eat and not eat. And she would say to the experimenters that she did not want to ruin her lunch if we were running sessions before lunch, or if it was after lunch and she knew she was full, she would not take the rest of the time. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.